Welcome to Ringside with Perspective. It's April 2026. I'm your host today. Your chair for this meeting is Daniel Malan, Portfolio Manager at Perspective, based in Canada. We've got Mikhail Liefrink and Clement Botram in Cape Town in the office at the moment. We're going to walk you through 4 of our portfolio holdings today. We're going to kick off with a company called Remgro, which we've owned for the best part of the last 7 years or so. So it's a company that we've come to know very well and really deeply admire and respect. And Mikhail's going to talk about the recent results and the strategy of Remgro.
It's important for us when we look at a company and the management to see what they say and then compare that to what they actually do. So if we use that to structure the discussion, let's have a look at what Remgro has said that they were going to do, and then we can compare it to what they've actually done. And so they mentioned that in the underlying businesses that they invest in, they were looking to fix up or to improve these underlying businesses. Then at the holdco level, they said that they would unlock value. They wanted to simplify their portfolio, and they wanted a larger exposure to the unlisted space. But at the same time, given that they're shifting more to the unlisted space, they want to maintain their transparency and their communication. They also then wanted to increase the dividend upstreaming from the underlying operating companies and then also improve their balance sheet strength. So if we then take this and we compare it to what they've actually done, they've actually been incredibly busy. And there's quite a bit of information here, so I might have to read off some of them. But we start off with OUTsurance, which was unbundled from RMI, and it is now a separately listed entity. Within RCL, they unbundled Rainbow Chicken, which is also now separately listed. They've sold off Vector Logistics. They're actively looking at turning around the sugar business and perhaps even selling that business. And then if you look at their core division, which is the foods, manufacturing and processing division, they've definitely improved on this one, and they're busy making bolt-on acquisitions within this business. Then there's also the potential for RCL to be taken private again by Remgro. Within Rainbow Chicken, they've already transitioned to a new broiler breed, which is no small feat. They've increased production, they've increased efficiencies, and they've essentially turned the business around completely. And this is also potentially up for sale. Within Mediclinic, they've already taken it private together with the MSC Group. They've stabilized the Swiss hospitals business, and they're currently busy with a like-for-like transaction whereby MSC will take over the Swiss hospital group. Remgro will take full control of the South African hospitals group, and they'll continue to own a 50-50 stake in the Middle Eastern hospitals group. This will significantly improve the debt position that Remgro is exposed to, which is also positive. Then within CIVH, they've sold a portion of this to Vodacom. It's taken a long time to happen because of the Competition Commission. But following this deal, they can now aggressively invest in growth capex, which will also be positive for that business. They've also unbundled eMedia Holdings. Then within the beverages, they've bought out minorities and delisted Distell. And finally, they've got this component which they refer to as their mature listed portfolio holdings. And here they've already sold out of all their BATS shares, the position that they hold there. They've reduced their stake in the FirstRand Group and realized quite a bit of cash for that. And there's potential for them to continue to sell down this FirstRand stake. Now, if you take the FirstRand stake together with the large cash pile that they have on their balance sheet, they actually have about 18.9 billion rand of dry powder on their balance sheet, which is impressive. So if we now take this all these actions together and sum it up, it's clear that they do have a simpler portfolio and they have a much larger unlisted component, and which we expect to become even larger. They've definitely improved their balance sheet position, making it much stronger. The underlying businesses have very strong free cash flows in the majority of them, barring one or two. And this has resulted in a much improved upstreaming of dividends to the holding company, which is very impressive. And then last but not least, they've also reduced the discount to NAV, although not all the way just yet. And then the last thing I'd just like to mention is that we've seen more and more signs of them increasing their appetite for investment in South Africa, which we also consider a positive marker.
Okay, next topic is Estée Lauder. I'm going to give this one to Clement. Is Estée Lauder's potentially acquiring a Spanish company called Puig?
Estée Lauder is a family-owned business that is listed, a family-owned cosmetic business listed in the US. So in terms of its size compared to its main competitor, so it's about half the size of L'Oréal. So it's really the second biggest player in the cosmetic space. The main difference with the first player, which is L'Oréal, is that they focus mainly on premium brands. So it's more an expensive type of portfolio and products that they have. So historically, if we take a step back on what happened to that market, so from about 2009 to around 2021, you had a huge growth in that market, and every player in this industry really benefited from that, and this accelerated even more post-COVID. And top of the cycle, just before the demand slowed down and that all the businesses in that industry became under pressure, Estée Lauder specifically made some acquisition top of the cycle, and one of them was quite big, which was the Tom Ford acquisition. So Tom Ford is also the one that was involved in the Gucci transaction back in the early 2000s. Some of you have watched House of Gucci, would know about that. And so there's clear evidence now that they have overpaid for that acquisition. And now, so fast forward to today, they changed the leadership team. A new CEO, a Frenchman, came to take the lead of the company. They focus on streamlining their portfolio, on cutting costs, and also on paying down debt because they have geared the balance sheet to make that big acquisition. So they are really in a consolidating phase. And a news came out recently, a couple of weeks ago, that they would be interested in acquiring, they're in talk to acquire potentially this fragrance business in Spain that is family owned. And so the market clearly signaled that they disliked this idea. The share price was under huge pressure after the announcement. So first of all, we don't know if this deal is going to actually go through. But if we just look at what we know about both companies and this deal, first of all, if it actually goes through, it's in line with the stated strategy of Estée Lauder, which will be a positive to us. It's also, yes, it's a big acquisition, and we don't know at which valuation what valuation they would have to pay to acquire that business. But it's an industry where you can have a lot of synergies, especially on the distribution side, when you make an acquisition. So it can be a very value accretive for both groups that are acquired. And then it's a deal that if it goes through, it's an acquisition from a family. So it's not like if they acquired an asset from private equity, which generally leads to some overvaluation that is paid for the deals. So, and also with regards to the valuation, there could be a valuation to be paid for that asset that is fair for both the seller and the buyer, because, for instance, this family might have issues with regards to succession, for instance, so they would be inclined seller of the business just because of that. So there might be a scenario where both the seller and the buyers are happy to settle at a fair price.
Thank you, Clement. The next topic is ExxonMobil and Total Energies. It's really the energy cycle that we want to talk about, and I'm going to give this one to Mikhail.
So we initially bought ExxonMobil and Total Energies at a key inflection point, which was April of 2020, when oil futures essentially went negative. Since then, oil prices rallied strongly to about $120 a barrel in 2022, and then have steadily been declining over the years to around $60 a barrel. Oil is a commodity, there's no doubt about that, and the spot oil prices swing wildly from highs to lows over short periods of time based on emotions of greed or fear. We, however, remain focused on the fundamentals of the business during these periods, and if we look at both Exxon and Total, we can see a number of fundamental things that have changed over the last couple of years. So they've closed or sold off non-core and non-operating business units and businesses. They've reduced their cost of production significantly. They've significantly improved their balance sheets over this period. They've bought back meaningful amounts of shares at value accretive levels, and they've posted solid results even in the midst of low oil price cycles. We then increased our exposure to both Exxon and Total towards the end of February of 2026 because of these fundamental improvements. We can't predict the future, and we absolutely had no idea that the war in Iran would erupt, or that the Gulf of Hormuz would be taken by Iran, or that these key energy manufacturing facilities in the neighboring Middle Eastern countries would be attacked. But they did, unfortunately. And this again led to this massive spike in the oil price of late. So we don't know how long this war is going to last, but if history is anything to go by, it's likely not to be weeks, but perhaps a couple of years. And on top of that, reinstating the oil and the LNG supply deficits that have come into play now is also not an overnight thing. But regardless of what the future holds, the fundamentals of both of these businesses remain solid, and we feel that they are well poised to handle whatever comes their way.
Okay, thank you, Mick. Last topic for today is the poultry companies that we own is Astral and Rainbow, and we're going to talk about the poultry cycle in particular, and I'm going to give this one to Clement.
Yes, so this industry has been under huge pressure post-COVID, like around 2022, 2023 especially. The different point of pressure or headwind this industry had were like huge decline in volumes, more than 10% some years. Also, you had a huge input cost inflation. Like in 2022, it was plus 30% in input cost. Then you had a lot of power outage. The water supply was unstable and is still to some extent unstable. You had threat by imports from the Brazilian producers, and you had also a lot of disease that killed a big number of birds. So this industry was under huge pressure. But what is really pleasing to see now is that most of those headwinds have either completely disappeared or have come down a lot. So if we look at the sales volume, they actually benefit from the issue that the red meat industry is facing, and also the fact that people are trading down to get access to cheaper protein. At the level of the imports, it didn't worsen from where it was. It actually probably improved a bit. Then at the level of the input cost of inflation, we are now bottom of the cycle in terms of input costs. So the commodity prices went down a lot. So that has helped up a lot. And also the fact that now that the energy supply side on the electricity side has been fixed, or is at least there's no problem with that currently. This has permitted to bring a lot of costs down, like the one they had with the diesel, to actually supply their facility with electricity. And on the water side, they are busy working in fixing those issues on their own. And the disease, the avian flu, it has come down a lot. So now those businesses become really, really profitable. And also, I forgot to mention that one of their main competitors also went under, which has permitted them to gain some market share.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Just a final comment. Actually, when I think about it, all four of these companies and industries, these companies have gone essentially in the last 7 years have gone through. They've each faced a bit of a crisis, and they've used that crisis to change their cost structures and to change their business and become a lot better business. And that's quite a common investment theme that we find where we find some of our better investment ideas around the world comes from the result of great companies adapting to a temporary sort of crisis event, which gives them the impetus to make the changes that's really necessary. And our companies tend to emerge on the other side of this in much better shape. And then typically what would happen is their costs are lower, the revenues start expanding, and you get an enormous release of free cash flow that comes through our companies. And we see the theme unfolding across all 6 companies that we described today. Anyways, okay, that's a wrap for Ringside for this month. Thank you very much for your attention. Thank you, gentlemen, for your inputs. I really appreciate that. And our work continues. Thank you.
Cheers.
Thanks.